I used to be that person refreshing productivity TikToks instead of being productive, switching between 12 different apps, and somehow getting less done than ever. Sound familiar? In 2025, when 47% of knowledge workers report switching apps 10 or more times daily, I discovered something that completely changed everything. A simple $2 notebook became my secret weapon against digital overwhelm. While everyone else was getting lost in endless productivity hacks and AI tools, this old-school method helped me reclaim my focus and actually start finishing what I started. But here's the thing nobody wants to talk about. The 2025 productivity crisis nobody talks about. We have more productivity tools than any generation in history, yet we're getting less done than ever before. The average knowledge worker now switches between over 300 different apps and websites every single day. Each time you switch, you lose 23 minutes of deep focus. Do the math on that one. We're spending more time context switching than actually working. I know this because I lived it. Last January, I decided to optimize my productivity setup. I downloaded Notion for project management, Todoist for task tracking, and Rescue Time for time monitoring. Then I added Slack for team communication and Obsidian for note-taking. By the end of the month, I had 15 different productivity apps on my phone and laptop. The result? I got less done in January than I had in December when I was just winging it. But here's where it gets really weird. I wasn't alone in this madness. Studies show that the average office worker checks email every 6 minutes. We interrupt ourselves 150 times per day just to look at our phones. The typical remote worker attends 5.5 hours of meetings daily, leaving barely 2.5 hours for actual work. Then we wonder why we feel busy but unproductive. The problem runs deeper than just too many notifications. Our brains are literally being rewired for distraction. Constant task switching causes measurable performance drops, with Stanford research showing that people who focus on fewer tasks see a 13% increase in productivity. We're training ourselves to be scatterbrained. Every ping, buzz, and red notification badge conditions us to crave the next dopamine hit from checking just one more thing. Meanwhile, productivity gurus keep selling us more complexity. They promise that the right combination of apps, templates, and systems will finally solve our focus problems. But adding more tools to solve a problem caused by too many tools is like trying to cure a hangover by drinking more alcohol. It makes no logical sense, yet millions of people keep buying into it. I fell for this trap completely. I spent hours watching YouTube videos about productivity systems. I bought premium subscriptions to apps I never fully learned how to use. I created elaborate digital workflows that required more maintenance than my actual work. The worst part? I felt productive while setting up these systems, even though I was just procrastinating with extra steps. The breaking point came when I realized I had 3 different apps reminding me to check my other productivity apps. My task management system had become a full-time job. I was spending more time organizing my work than doing my work. Something had to change, but every solution I found online involved adding yet another layer of digital complexity. Traditional productivity advice completely misses the mark for people living in 2025. Most systems assume you have long stretches of uninterrupted time, which basically doesn't exist anymore. They assume you can focus on one thing for hours, when our attention spans have been shredded by years of social media conditioning. They assume you want to learn complex methodologies, when your brain is already overloaded from managing your digital life. The stakes keep getting higher too. Remote work means the boundary between work and life has completely dissolved. Your bedroom is your office. Your kitchen table is your conference room. There's no physical separation to help your brain switch modes. You wake up and immediately start responding to messages that came in overnight. You go to bed thinking about tomorrow's Zoom calls. The always-on culture has made rest feel like laziness and boundaries feel like weakness. AI tools promise to make everything easier, but they've just created new categories of work. Take AI hiring tools, for example. Companies invest heavily in these systems, only to find that the complexity of creating effective prompts and managing false positives actually reduces their return on investment. You spend time teaching artificial intelligence how to do tasks you could have just done yourself. The paradox of choice has reached ridiculous levels. There are literally thousands of productivity apps available right now. Each one claims to be the solution to all your problems. You can spend weeks just researching which tool to use, let alone actually using it. Analysis paralysis has become the norm. We're so overwhelmed by options that we end up choosing nothing and staying stuck in our current chaos. Social media makes everything worse because it creates the illusion that everyone else has figured it out. You see perfectly curated productivity setups on Instagram. You watch TikToks of people with color-coded calendars and aesthetic desk setups. You follow productivity influencers who make it look effortless. But behind the scenes, most of these people are just as scattered as everyone else. They're just better at making their chaos look organized for content. The real kicker? Most of us know exactly what we need to do to be productive. We don't need another app to tell us to exercise, eat well, sleep enough, and focus on important tasks. We need systems that actually help us do these things despite living in a world designed to distract us. We need tools that work with our broken attention spans, not against them. After my 15-app experiment failed spectacularly, I started looking for something different. Not another digital solution, but something that could cut through all the noise. Something that wouldn't crash, need updates, or send notifications. Something so simple that I couldn't overcomplicate it even if I tried. Something that cost less than my monthly subscription to apps I barely used. The answer was sitting in plain sight, but it went against everything the productivity industry teaches. It wasn't high-tech or sophisticated. It didn't sync across devices or integrate with other platforms. It couldn't track my habits or generate reports. It was analog, old-fashioned, and completely immune to the digital chaos destroying everyone's focus. Sometimes the best solutions are the ones that survived long before our current problems existed. While everyone else chases the latest productivity trend, the most effective tool might be something your grandparents used without thinking twice about it. What I discovered next completely changed how I think about productivity. And it all started with abandoning my expensive digital setup for something that seemed almost too simple to work. Why I ditched my $500 productivity setup for $2. Picture this ridiculousness. I had a $500 productivity setup that made me less productive than when I had nothing at all. My monthly subscriptions included Notion Pro for $16, Todoist Premium for $12, and Rescue Time Premium for $8, plus another $20 across various other apps. Then there was my fancy Smart Planner for $80, an iPad with productivity apps for $200, and a premium stylus for $50. I felt like a productivity influencer with all this gear, but my actual output was embarrassing. My morning routine involved checking 7 different apps before I even got out of bed. I would open Rescue Time to see how I spent yesterday, check Notion to review my projects, scan Todoist for today's tasks, glance at my Smart Planner for appointments, open Focus to start a timer, check Calendly for incoming meetings, and finally launch my habit tracker to log that I woke up on time. By the time I finished this digital parade, 30 minutes had vanished, and I felt mentally exhausted before starting any real work. The breaking point happened on a Tuesday in March. I got 3 notifications within 5 minutes. First, Notion reminded me to review my weekly goals. Then Todoist pinged me about an overdue task. Finally, my habit tracker asked if I had completed my morning routine. I realized I was getting notifications to check apps that reminded me to check other apps. My productivity system had become a full-time job managing my productivity system. That evening, I calculated the time I spent each day just maintaining these tools. Updating Notion databases took 15 minutes. Processing Todoist tasks required 20 minutes. Reviewing Rescue Time reports consumed 10 minutes. Syncing my Smart Planner with digital calendars ate up another 15 minutes. Research shows knowledge workers lose 47 minutes per day to context switching, and I was experiencing this firsthand. No wonder I never had time for actual work. The cost analysis made everything worse. Beyond the monthly subscriptions totaling $56, I had spent countless hours learning these systems. I watched YouTube tutorials about Notion templates, read blog posts about Todoist workflows, and joined online communities discussing productivity optimization. I was consuming productivity content instead of being productive. The irony was suffocating. My digital calendars synced everywhere, which sounds convenient until you realize it creates chaos. Events would duplicate across platforms. Time zones would shift randomly. Notifications would fire from multiple devices for the same appointment. Technology was supposed to simplify my life, but it had created new categories of problems I never knew existed. The AI assistants made things even stranger. I would ask ChatGPT to write emails, then spend 20 minutes editing them to sound human. My scheduling assistant would book meetings during my designated focus time because I forgot to update its availability settings. Voice assistants would mishear my task additions and create completely random to-dos. I was training artificial intelligence while my actual intelligence remained scattered across a dozen different platforms. Smart planners promised the best of both worlds, but delivered the worst of everything. Battery life meant my planner would die during important meetings. Syncing delays meant tasks would appear hours late. The writing feel was weird compared to real paper. Updates would change the interface just when I got comfortable. I had paid premium prices for a digital solution that worked worse than basic pen and paper. The subscription fatigue became unbearable. Every month brought renewal notices for apps I barely used. Free trials would auto-convert to premium accounts I forgot about. New features would launch behind additional paywalls. I was paying hundreds of dollars annually for the privilege of feeling overwhelmed by choice. The financial stress added another layer of complexity to my already complicated productivity situation. Something had to change, but I refused to add more complexity to solve problems caused by too much complexity. I needed a system that worked with my scattered 2025 brain, not against it. The solution had to meet 3 non-negotiable requirements, because I learned the hard way that anything more complicated than 3 requirements is already too complicated. First requirement was brutal simplicity. If the system required tutorials, onboarding, or any learning curve whatsoever, it would fail. My brain was already overstimulated from managing my digital life. I needed something that worked immediately without any setup or configuration. Second requirement was immediate actionability. No more systems that looked impressive but provided no clear next steps. I needed something that would tell me exactly what to do right now, not in some theoretical future when I had more time to figure things out. Third requirement was short-term focus. Long-term planning feels impossible when the world changes daily. Remote work schedules shift constantly. Project priorities flip overnight. Client demands evolve hourly. I needed a system that could adapt to chaos while maintaining some semblance of structure. These requirements eliminated every digital solution I had tried. Apps require learning curves. Software needs configuration. Platforms demand integration. Technology promises simplicity, but delivers complexity wrapped in sleek interfaces. Even the most user-friendly apps still require you to remember which app does what and where you stored which information. My overstimulated brain needed less stimulation, not more. Every notification trained my attention span to be shorter. Every app switch cost mental energy I could not afford to waste. Every digital interaction pulled me deeper into the distraction ecosystem. The solution had to exist outside this entire system, immune to updates, notifications, and the endless cycle of digital maintenance. The search for this mythical simple system led me somewhere completely unexpected. While everyone else chased the latest productivity innovations, the answer sat in plain sight at every corner store. It required no batteries, no internet connection, and no monthly subscriptions. It never crashed, never needed updates, and never sent notifications. The irony struck me like lightning. In our desperate quest to optimize everything with technology, we had abandoned the tools that actually worked. Generations of successful people had used simple methods to accomplish extraordinary things. They did not have productivity apps, yet they built businesses, wrote books, and changed the world. The most effective productivity tool costs exactly $2. You can buy it anywhere without creating accounts or providing credit card information. It works the same way for everyone without customization or setup. It never becomes obsolete and requires zero technical support. But here's the problem with most productivity advice. It assumes you can focus for hours at a time, which basically doesn't exist anymore. The 3 requirements every 2025 productivity system needs. Most productivity advice assumes you can sit down and focus for hours, but our brains don't work that way anymore. The TikTok generation processes information in 8-second bursts. We've been conditioned by endless scrolling to expect immediate gratification and constant stimulation. When productivity gurus tell us to meditate for 20 minutes or do deep work for 3 hours straight, our brains literally reject the suggestion. We've trained ourselves to crave the next dopamine hit, not sustained concentration. Most productivity methods assume you have mental energy reserves that don't exist in 2025. After spending 6 hours in Zoom meetings, your brain feels like scrambled eggs. The last thing you want to encounter is a complex system that requires learning new terminology, setting up elaborate workflows, or making dozens of configuration decisions. Your cognitive capacity is already maxed out from context switching between work apps, social media notifications, and family group chats. Any system that adds mental load instead of reducing it will fail immediately. This brings us to the first non-negotiable requirement. The system must be simple enough to use when your brain is completely fried from digital overwhelm. If you need to watch tutorial videos, read instruction manuals, or customize settings, you won't use it consistently. Period. Your future self, exhausted from another day of back-to-back video calls and endless Slack messages, will abandon anything that requires mental effort to operate. The system needs to work even when you're running on fumes and your attention span has been shredded by constant interruptions. Think about how you feel at 4 p.m. on a Tuesday after attending 5 virtual meetings, responding to 47 messages, and switching between 12 different browser tabs. Your brain is not looking for complexity or sophistication. It needs something that works without thinking, like muscle memory. The moment you have to remember which button does what or where you saved that template, the system becomes another source of stress instead of relief. The second requirement eliminates most modern productivity advice immediately. The system must be actionable without downloading another app, creating another account, or binging another YouTube tutorial series. We're already drowning in digital tools that promise to solve our problems but create new ones instead. Every new app means another password to remember, another interface to learn, and another notification source competing for your attention. Consider how ridiculous this has become. People download productivity apps to help them focus, then spend hours watching videos about how to use those productivity apps. They join online communities dedicated to optimizing their productivity systems instead of being productive. They create elaborate digital setups that require more maintenance than their actual work. The tools have become the work, which defeats the entire purpose. The actionability requirement means you should be able to start using the system within minutes, not hours or days. No setup phases, no configuration wizards, no integration requirements with your existing tech stack. If the first step involves syncing your calendar or importing your contacts, you're already heading toward failure. Your overloaded brain will procrastinate on the setup phase indefinitely, leaving you stuck exactly where you started. Real actionability means the system tells you exactly what to do right now, today, without requiring you to plan your planning or organize your organization. Most productivity methods fail this test spectacularly. They give you frameworks for thinking about productivity rather than specific actions to take immediately. They explain principles instead of providing step-by-step instructions you can follow while half asleep. The third requirement acknowledges the reality of living in constant chaos. Long-term planning feels impossible when everything changes daily. Your work priorities shift based on client emergencies. Your personal schedule gets disrupted by family obligations. Your energy levels fluctuate wildly depending on sleep quality, news cycles, and social media consumption. Any system that requires you to stick to plans made weeks ago will crumble under the weight of real life. Traditional goal-setting advice tells you to create 5-year visions and annual objectives, but this approach feels completely disconnected from modern reality. How can you plan for next year when you don't know what crisis will emerge next week? The world moves too fast for long-term commitments to specific tactics or schedules. Your productivity system needs to adapt to chaos, not pretend chaos doesn't exist. Short-term focus doesn't mean abandoning long-term thinking entirely. It means your daily system should work regardless of whether your bigger plans change. You need a method that helps you make progress today, even when tomorrow remains uncertain. The system should be flexible enough to handle unexpected opportunities and resilient enough to survive complete schedule disruptions. Most productivity methods violate all three requirements simultaneously. Consider the popular Getting Things Done system, which requires extensive upfront setup, complex categorization schemes, and weekly review sessions. Or look at elaborate project management tools that demand hours of training and constant maintenance. These approaches might work for people with stable schedules and abundant mental energy, but they're completely unrealistic for anyone living in 2025's attention economy. Habit stacking sounds reasonable in theory, but fails the simplicity test when you try implementing it with a fried brain. Bullet journaling appeals to creative types, but requires artistic skills and time investments that busy people don't have. Time blocking works until your carefully planned day gets demolished by a single unexpected phone call or urgent email. These methods look impressive on Instagram, but crumble under real-world pressure. The rarity of finding something that meets all three criteria creates an interesting problem. Most people assume such a system doesn't exist, so they keep cycling through complicated solutions that promise everything but deliver frustration. They blame themselves for lacking discipline rather than recognizing that the systems themselves are fundamentally incompatible with modern life. Digital productivity tools particularly struggle with these requirements because technology inherently adds complexity. Every app needs updates, every platform requires account management, and every integration creates new failure points. Software crashes, servers go down, and sync errors corrupt your carefully organized data. Even the most user-friendly apps still require you to remember which app does what and where you stored specific information. The solution that actually meets all three requirements exists, but it hides in plain sight because it's too simple for most people to take seriously. It works when your phone battery dies, when Wi-Fi crashes, and when you're too tired to remember passwords. It requires no technical skills, no monthly subscriptions, and no customer support. It adapts instantly to changing priorities without losing any of your previous work. This system survived for centuries before smartphones existed, which proves its effectiveness across different technological eras. While everyone else chases the latest productivity innovations, the most reliable solution costs less than a coffee and fits in your back pocket. The approach seems almost insulting compared to sophisticated digital alternatives, but that simplicity is exactly what our overstimulated brains desperately need. What I discovered next completely changed how I think about organizing my day, and it starts with something that sounds overwhelming, but is actually the opposite. The hourly planning revolution that predates smartphones. Hourly planning became the answer that met all three requirements. I know that sounds completely overwhelming, but it's actually way simpler and more liberating than it appears. When I first heard about planning every single hour, my immediate reaction was absolute horror. The idea of micromanaging every minute seemed like the fastest way to become a productivity robot. But here's what nobody tells you about hourly planning. It's not about becoming a slave to your schedule. It's about creating boundaries in a world where work never stops bleeding into personal time. When everything is planned, nothing can hijack your attention without permission. Those random texts asking you to jump on a quick call, sorry, that hour is already allocated. The urge to check social media because you're bored, your schedule tells you exactly what you should be doing instead. The anxiety about forgetting something important, everything is written down and assigned a specific time slot. The counterintuitive truth is that more structure actually creates more freedom, not less. When every hour has a purpose, you stop second-guessing your choices. You stop wasting mental energy deciding what to do next. You stop feeling guilty about taking breaks because rest is scheduled just like work. The rigid framework paradoxically gives you permission to fully engage with whatever you're doing without worrying about everything else you should be doing. Think about how many times you've asked yourself, what should I be doing right now? Throughout a typical day, probably dozens of times. Each instance creates a tiny moment of decision fatigue. Your brain has to scan through all possible options, weigh priorities, consider energy levels, and make a choice. These micro-decisions accumulate throughout the day, slowly draining your willpower reserves. Hourly planning eliminates this entire mental process. The answer to "what should I be doing right now?" is always written right there in front of you. Decision fatigue is a real psychological phenomenon that gets worse in our choice-overloaded world. Every app on your phone represents dozens of potential actions. Every website offers infinite rabbit holes to explore. Every notification demands an immediate decision about whether to respond. By the afternoon, your brain is exhausted from making tiny choices all day long. Hourly planning removes most of these decisions by making them in advance when your willpower is strongest. The beauty of this system becomes obvious when you contrast it with how most people operate. They start each day with vague intentions and loose priorities. They react to whatever seems most urgent in the moment. They switch between tasks based on mood, energy, or external pressures. They end each day feeling busy but unproductive because they never had a clear plan for how to spend their time. Sound familiar? Hourly planning flips this entire dynamic. Instead of reacting to circumstances, you proactively design your day. Instead of hoping you'll remember important tasks, you assign them specific time slots. Instead of battling distraction all day, you create a structured environment where focus becomes easier. The schedule becomes your defense against the chaos of modern life. Most people resist this level of planning because they think it will make life feel rigid and mechanical. They worry about losing spontaneity or missing unexpected opportunities. But the opposite happens. When you have a clear structure, you can make informed decisions about when to deviate from it. You can look at your schedule and decide which tasks are flexible enough to move around. You can swap time blocks or reschedule activities without losing track of everything else. The system works especially well for people with scattered attention spans because it provides external structure when internal motivation fails. Your ADHD brain might not remember to exercise, but your schedule will remind you at exactly 7 a.m. Your procrastination tendencies might avoid important tasks, but the time block forces you to confront them at predetermined moments. The system becomes external executive function when your internal one isn't working properly. Here's where most people make a crucial mistake, though. They try to implement hourly planning using digital tools like calendar apps or scheduling software. This completely misses the point and usually leads to failure. Digital systems create more complexity, not less. They require device switching, internet connections, and constant syncing across platforms. They generate notifications that compete with your focus. They tempt you into endless customization and optimization instead of simple execution. The analog approach eliminates all these problems instantly. The layout is straightforward. The left side serves as your schedule with every hour written down, while the right side divides into monthly goals and daily tasks. This structure organizes your entire day on a single page without menus, loading screens, or sync delays. Research from Owl Labs shows that remote workers who use low-tech systems demonstrate improved focus compared to their digital-dependent counterparts. The physical act of writing engages different brain regions than typing, creating stronger memory formation and psychological commitment to your planned activities. When you write something by hand, your brain processes the information more deeply than when you type it on a screen. The physical nature of paper creates a different relationship with your schedule. You can see the entire day at once without scrolling. You can make quick notes or modifications without opening menus. You can cross things off with satisfying finality instead of clicking digital checkboxes that disappear into the void. The tangible nature makes your time feel more real and valuable. There's something almost meditative about writing out your schedule by hand each morning. It forces you to think deliberately about how you want to spend your hours. You can't just copy and paste yesterday's plan because writing takes effort. This friction is actually beneficial because it makes you consider whether each scheduled activity still makes sense given today's priorities and energy levels. Hourly planning predates smartphones, social media, and the entire attention economy that's currently destroying our focus. People used this method to build businesses, write books, and accomplish extraordinary things long before productivity apps existed. The technique survived because it works, not because it's trendy or technologically impressive. The method adapts perfectly to modern challenges because it acknowledges the reality of constant interruption. Instead of pretending you'll have long stretches of uninterrupted time, it breaks everything into manageable hourly chunks. Instead of assuming you'll remember important tasks, it assigns them specific slots. Instead of hoping motivation will strike randomly, it creates structure that works regardless of how you feel. This old-school approach solves new-school problems precisely because it existed before those problems were created. While digital tools try to manage the complexity they help create, analog methods sidestep the entire ecosystem of distraction. But choosing pen and paper in 2025 feels almost rebellious when everyone else is chasing the latest productivity innovations. Why pen and paper beats every productivity app? The physical advantages of analog tools become obvious once you experience them firsthand. While everyone else downloads apps promising to revolutionize their workflow using machine learning algorithms, I'm using a $2 notebook like some kind of productivity caveman. But neuroscience research shows that handwriting activates completely different brain regions compared to typing on keyboards or screens. When you write something by hand, your brain lights up in areas responsible for memory formation and learning. Brain imaging studies reveal that handwriting triggers neural activity at specific frequencies associated with deep learning and retention. This same brain activity doesn't happen when you type the same information on a computer or phone. Your brain literally processes handwritten information differently, creating stronger neural pathways and better memory consolidation. The physical act of forming letters with a pen engages motor memory in ways that pressing keys cannot replicate. Your hand remembers the motion of writing important tasks or goals, which reinforces the mental commitment to actually completing them. When you type something into an app, your fingers perform the same basic motions regardless of what you're writing. But handwriting requires unique muscle movements for each word, creating multiple pathways for your brain to encode and retrieve that information later. This explains why students who take handwritten notes consistently outperform those who type their notes on laptops, even when the typed notes contain more complete information. The act of writing forces your brain to process and synthesize information in real time, rather than just transcribing it mindlessly. You have to think about what you're writing because handwriting is slower than typing, which means your brain stays actively engaged with the content. Digital productivity tools promise convenience but deliver constant distraction. Every app comes loaded with notifications designed to grab your attention. Your task manager sends reminders about overdue items. Your calendar app alerts you about upcoming meetings. Your habit tracker asks whether you completed your morning routine. Each notification pulls your focus away from whatever you're actually trying to accomplish. Pen and paper eliminates this entire ecosystem of interruption. Jerry Seinfeld's productivity rule, work or do nothing, eliminates distraction loops. The rule is simple. When it's time to work, you either work on your designated task or you sit there doing absolutely nothing. No checking email, no scrolling social media, no organizing your desk. Just work or nothing. This binary choice makes procrastination incredibly boring, which naturally pushes you toward productive action. Research on digital fatigue supports this approach, with AICPA studies showing that micro-rest periods actually improve focus when they're intentional rather than reactive to digital stimuli. The reliability factor alone makes analog tools superior for actual productivity. Digital apps crash at the worst possible moments, usually when you need them most. Software updates change interfaces just when you've gotten comfortable with the current layout. Cloud sync failures lose your data or create duplicate entries. Server outages make your carefully organized system completely inaccessible. Battery life turns your expensive digital planner into a useless rectangle of black plastic. None of these problems exist with pen and paper. A notebook never needs charging, never loses internet connection, and never stops working because of a software bug. You can't accidentally delete your handwritten schedule or lose it to a corrupted database. The physical nature of paper makes your productivity system completely independent of technology infrastructure, which means it works anywhere under any conditions. The fear of missing out on digital productivity features is real though. What about automatic syncing across devices? What about smart notifications and AI-powered suggestions? What about data analytics and progress tracking? These features sound impressive in marketing copy, but they rarely deliver meaningful benefits in real-world usage. Most people spend more time managing their productivity apps than actually being productive, which defeats the entire purpose. The satisfaction of physically crossing off completed tasks creates a dopamine hit that digital checkboxes cannot match. When you draw a line through a finished item on paper, you're creating a permanent visual record of your accomplishment. Digital tasks just disappear when you mark them complete, which provides less psychological reward. The physical action of crossing off items feels more substantial and rewarding than clicking buttons on screens. This psychological element explains why people often abandon digital productivity systems after a few weeks, but can maintain paper-based systems for months or years. The tactile feedback of writing and crossing off tasks creates stronger emotional connections to your goals and progress. Your brain registers these physical actions as more meaningful than their digital equivalents, which increases motivation and consistency. The simplicity of analog systems eliminates decision paralysis around features and customization options. Digital productivity apps offer hundreds of configuration choices, template options, and integration possibilities. These choices can paralyze users who spend hours optimizing their setup instead of actually using it. Paper notebooks provide just enough structure to be useful without overwhelming you with options. The commitment factor of handwriting creates psychological investment that typing cannot replicate. When you write something down by hand, you're making a stronger mental commitment to that task or goal. The physical effort required to form each letter makes your brain take the written content more seriously. This explains why handwritten goals have higher completion rates than typed goals, even when the content is identical. The specific type of notebook matters more than you might expect, though. Regular line notebooks work fine, but the wrong size or paper quality can undermine the entire system. Notebooks that are too large become inconvenient to carry everywhere, which reduces consistency. Notebooks that are too small don't provide enough space for comprehensive daily planning. Paper quality affects the writing experience significantly, with cheap paper bleeding through and creating messy pages that are difficult to read. But the real magic happens when you combine the neurological advantages of handwriting with a specific organizational framework that handles the chaos of modern life. The physical layout of information on each page creates natural workflows that support consistent daily planning without requiring complex rules or procedures. Getting this structure right makes the difference between a system that works for a few days and one that transforms your productivity for years. The exact notebook setup that changed everything. The specific layout that transformed my productivity looks deceptively simple, but the arrangement creates a framework that handles modern chaos without overwhelming your scattered brain. I use 2 full pages for each day, which might seem excessive until you realize the mental clarity this creates. The physical separation of different information types prevents everything from blending into one giant mess of tasks, appointments, and random thoughts. On the left side, I write the date at the top, then list every hour I plan to be awake down the page. This becomes my daily schedule, starting from wake-up time and ending at bedtime. The hourly slots create the skeleton of my entire day. Each time slot becomes a container holding one specific activity, preventing the usual chaos of trying to do 12 things simultaneously. 7 a.m. gets its own line. 8 a.m. gets the next line. 9 a.m. follows that pattern. I continue until my planned bedtime, usually around 11 p.m. This creates about 16 or 17 time slots, depending on sleep schedule. The visual layout immediately shows how much time actually exists, eliminating the common problem of overestimating what fits into one day. Writing down every hour forces you to confront time's reality. Most people have no idea how they spend their hours, explaining why they constantly feel busy but unproductive. The hourly breakdown makes time visible and tangible instead of abstract. You can see exactly how much space exists between morning coffee and that afternoon meeting. You can visualize how long projects actually take versus how long you hoped they would take. The right side gets divided into 2 distinct sections using a simple horizontal line across the middle. The top section holds monthly goals, while the bottom contains daily tasks. This visual separation prevents short-term urgency from drowning out long-term priorities. Your brain processes both information types without getting overwhelmed because they occupy separate physical spaces. The monthly goals section stays relatively stable day to day, creating continuity and preventing you from losing sight of bigger objectives. This section might contain 3 to 5 major things you want to accomplish this month. Business goals, personal projects, health targets, or relationship priorities all live here. Seeing these goals every single day reinforces their importance and keeps them connected to daily actions. The daily tasks section changes completely each morning based on what needs attention today. This holds everything from grocery shopping to responding to important emails to working on specific project components. The separation between monthly goals and daily tasks prevents you from confusing busy work with meaningful progress. You can clearly see whether today's activities actually support bigger objectives or just fill time. This layout prevents overwhelm because it chunks information into manageable categories instead of creating one massive list that paralyses decision-making ability. Your brain can process monthly goals quickly, then focus on daily tasks, then reference the hourly schedule without jumping between different types of thinking. The physical organization supports mental organization, reducing cognitive load and making planning feel effortless. The visual separation creates natural boundaries between different life aspects. Work tasks stay in their designated area. Personal goals occupy their specific section. Time blocks maintain their structured format. This prevents everything bleeding together into one overwhelming mess. You can focus on one section at a time without losing track of how everything connects. The genius becomes obvious when you start filling it out each morning. The process flows naturally from section to section, building momentum instead of creating friction. You're not jumping between different apps or trying to remember which system handles which information type. Everything lives in one place, organized in a way that matches how your brain actually processes different plans and priorities. The physical act of writing in each section creates different psychological commitments. When you write monthly goals, you're making a longer-term promise to yourself. When you list daily tasks, you're committing to specific actions today. When you schedule items into hourly slots, you're creating concrete accountability. Each section reinforces different aspects of follow-through and execution. The notebook becomes a complete productivity dashboard requiring no internet connection, battery life, or software updates. You can reference your entire day instantly without unlocking devices or opening apps. The visual layout provides immediate context about what you should be doing now, what comes next, and how today's activities support bigger goals. This system handles complex modern life because it acknowledges that you need to manage multiple time horizons simultaneously. Monthly goals provide direction and meaning. Daily tasks create actionable steps. Hourly scheduling ensures everything actually gets done. Most productivity systems focus on just one element, explaining why they fail when real life gets complicated. The layout adapts seamlessly to changing circumstances without losing structure. If an emergency disrupts your planned schedule, you can quickly reschedule items by drawing arrows or making notes directly on the page. The flexibility comes from simplicity, not from complex features that break when you need them most. You maintain control over your system instead of becoming dependent on digital tools that might fail. After implementing this layout consistently, my completion rate tripled and organic audience grew to 450K in 22 months through consistent daily content blocks. These are verifiable business metrics that demonstrate the system's effectiveness. Unlike digital tools that require constant updates and server maintenance, analog planning requires no technical infrastructure and works regardless of technological failures. The specific arrangement creates a workflow that becomes automatic with practice. You naturally glance at monthly goals to maintain perspective, scan daily tasks to identify priorities, then reference the hourly schedule to know what to do right now. This eliminates the constant mental energy drain of figuring out what deserves your attention at any given moment. But having the right layout is only half the battle. The sequence in which you fill out each section determines whether this system actually works or becomes another abandoned productivity experiment. the strategic order that makes or breaks your day. The first thing you write down determines whether this entire system works or becomes another failed productivity experiment gathering dust on your shelf. Most people mess up right here at the beginning because they start with their dreams and aspirations instead of harsh reality. They write down everything they wish they could accomplish today rather than acknowledging what they're already committed to doing. This backwards approach creates immediate conflict between fantasy and reality, which guarantees failure before you even start. You must begin with everything that's already locked in stone. These are appointments that cannot be moved, calls that are scheduled at specific times, meetings that other people are expecting you to attend, and any commitments that exist regardless of your personal preferences. If you're a student, your classes go in first. If you work a traditional job, your work hours get written down immediately. If you have a dentist appointment, that goes on the page before anything else. These fixed commitments create the skeleton of your entire day. They're the immovable pieces that everything else must work around. Writing them down first forces you to see exactly how much time you actually have available for everything else. Most people dramatically overestimate their free time because they forget about these locked commitments. They make ambitious plans, assuming they have 8 hours of flexibility when they really have 3 hours scattered across the day. The visual impact of seeing these commitments written down prevents the common mistake of double booking yourself or making impossible schedules. When you can see that you have a meeting from 2 to 3 p.m. and another call at 4 p.m., you know that any task requiring deep focus needs to fit somewhere else. This eliminates the frustration of planning 3 hours of concentrated work during a time period that's actually broken up by mandatory obligations. Once your fixed commitments are locked in place, you move to the second step: priority tasks that actually move your goals forward. These are the activities that will make tomorrow different from today. Not busy work, not reactive responses to other people's urgencies, but deliberate actions that create progress toward things you actually care about. This might be working on a specific project, making important phone calls, or completing tasks that have been postponed too many times. The magic number for priority tasks is 3, never more than 3. This isn't arbitrary or overly cautious. 3 priority tasks represent the absolute maximum that your brain can handle while still maintaining quality and focus. When you try to accomplish 4 or more priority items in one day, you spread your attention too thin and end up doing mediocre work on everything. Your brain starts switching between tasks instead of diving deep into any single one. More than 3 priority tasks also creates overwhelming pressure that leads to procrastination and avoidance. When you look at a list of 7 important things you need to accomplish today, your brain immediately feels stressed and looks for escape routes. 3 items feel challenging but achievable. 7 items feel impossible and paralyzing. The psychological difference between these numbers is enormous and directly impacts your follow-through rate. This limitation forces you to make hard choices about what truly deserves your best mental energy. You cannot treat everything as equally important when you're limited to 3 slots. This constraint eliminates the common problem of having lengthy priority lists where nothing actually gets prioritized. 3 tasks mean 3 things that will definitely happen today, not 15 things that might happen if everything goes perfectly. The third step involves essential habits that maintain your sanity in the chaos of modern life. These are activities like exercise, reading, meditation, meal planning, or any regular practice that supports your physical and mental health. Habits get scheduled after priority tasks because they provide the foundation for everything else you're trying to accomplish. You cannot sustain high performance without maintaining the basic systems that keep your body and mind functioning properly. Essential habits differ from priority tasks because they focus on maintenance rather than advancement. They keep you operating at your current capacity instead of pushing toward new achievements. Both categories matter, but they serve different functions and require different types of mental energy. Mixing them together creates confusion about what you're trying to accomplish and why you're doing specific activities. The fourth step covers life maintenance tasks that cannot be ignored forever without creating bigger problems. Grocery shopping, laundry, cleaning, bill paying, car maintenance, and all the mundane activities that keep your life functioning properly. These tasks feel boring compared to exciting priority work, but neglecting them creates stress and distraction that undermines everything else you're trying to accomplish. Life maintenance tasks often get postponed because they seem less important than goal-oriented activities. But running out of clean clothes or having no food in the house creates crisis situations that destroy your carefully planned schedule. Emergency, grocery runs, and frantic laundry sessions consume mental energy and time that should be available for meaningful work. Scheduling maintenance prevents these predictable emergencies. The order of these 4 steps matters more than most people realize because each category builds on the previous one. Fixed commitments create boundaries. Priority tasks fill the most important available time. Essential habits protect your capacity to sustain effort. Life maintenance prevents everything from falling apart. Mixing up this sequence creates conflicts and inefficiencies that make the entire system break down. Now comes the most critical phase where everything either clicks into place or falls apart completely. The scheduling phase transforms your lists into a concrete plan that accounts for energy levels, transition time, and the realities of how different types of work actually get accomplished. This is where most people fail because they treat all activities as interchangeable puzzle pieces instead of understanding the strategic timing that makes execution possible. Research shows that only 20% of adults chronically procrastinate, which means simple systems like hourly scheduling help anyone break that trend. Try this $2 notebook for 1 week and track your focus gains to see how analog simplicity outperforms digital clutter. The secret lies in recognizing that different types of tasks require different mental resources and work better at specific times of day. The scheduling secret that guarantees success. Morning hours create the perfect window for your most important work because your brain operates with maximum capacity during these early slots. Priority tasks must be scheduled as early as possible in the day, and this isn't just productivity guru nonsense. There's actual science behind why your brain works differently at 7 a.m. compared to 3 p.m. Your willpower operates like a muscle that gets tired from use. Every decision you make throughout the day depletes this mental resource. By the time afternoon rolls around, you've already burned through most of your cognitive fuel-making choices about what to wear, what to eat, which emails to answer, and dozens of other micro-decisions that seem insignificant but add up fast. Research shows that willpower depletion is a real phenomenon that affects everyone, regardless of how disciplined they think they are. Your brain literally has less capacity for complex decision-making and sustained focus as the day progresses. This explains why you can tackle challenging projects in the morning, but find yourself scrolling social media by 4 p.m. instead of working on anything meaningful. It's not a character flaw or lack of motivation. Your brain is operating with diminished resources. The strategy of front-loading important work before distractions multiply makes perfect sense when you understand how modern life works. In the morning, your phone has fewer notifications waiting. Your email inbox hasn't been flooded with new requests. Your coworkers haven't started sending random questions that derail your focus. The world is quieter, which gives your brain space to think deeply about complex problems without constant interruption. Morning hours also align with your natural circadian rhythms, which influence alertness and cognitive function throughout the day. Your body is designed to be most alert shortly after waking up, assuming you've gotten decent sleep. This natural peak in mental energy creates an ideal window for tackling tasks that require sustained concentration and creative problem-solving. Fighting against these biological patterns by scheduling important work for later in the day makes everything unnecessarily difficult. The practical application of this timing strategy means scheduling your 3 priority tasks during the first few hours of your day, before other commitments and distractions take over. If you wake up at 7 a.m., your priority work should happen between 8 and 11 and whenever possible. This window represents your cognitive prime time, when your brain has the most capacity for demanding mental work. Essential habits need strategic scheduling too, but for different reasons. Habits work best when they're connected to existing routines and scheduled consistently at the same time each day. The key is finding spots in your schedule where habits can create positive momentum rather than competing with more demanding activities. Exercise works particularly well as a morning habit because it energizes you for the rest of the day rather than depleting mental resources. Physical activity actually improves cognitive function and mood, creating a foundation that supports everything else you're trying to accomplish. Scheduling exercise before work gives you energy and focus benefits that last for hours afterward. Reading or learning habits often work better in the evening when your brain needs downtime from decision-making, but can still absorb information passively. These habits provide a productive transition between work mode and rest mode, helping you wind down while still making progress on personal development goals. The timing leverages your natural energy cycles instead of fighting against them. Meditation or mindfulness habits can be strategically placed during natural transition points in your day, like right after lunch when your energy typically dips. These practices provide mental reset opportunities that restore some cognitive capacity for afternoon activities. Even 5 or 10 minutes of focused breathing can significantly improve your ability to concentrate on whatever comes next. Life maintenance tasks require the opposite approach from priority work. These activities should be scheduled during lower energy periods when your brain needs a break from intensive thinking. Grocery shopping, laundry, cleaning, and administrative tasks can actually provide mental relief when placed strategically between more demanding work blocks. Afternoon time slots work perfectly for maintenance activities because these tasks don't require the same cognitive resources as priority work. You can fold laundry while listening to music or podcasts. You can run errands while giving your brain a break from complex decision-making. These activities actually provide active recovery that prepares you for evening routines or personal time. The complete roadmap for every hour eliminates the constant mental energy drain of figuring out what to do next. When you look at your schedule at any given moment, the answer is already written down. This removes hundreds of micro-decisions throughout the day and preserves mental resources for executing tasks rather than choosing between options. Having this roadmap also creates psychological safety because you know everything important is accounted for. You're not constantly worried about forgetting something crucial or missing important deadlines. The external structure provided by your schedule replaces the mental effort required to keep track of everything in your head, which frees up cognitive capacity for actually doing the work. But even the perfect schedule won't work without the right execution strategy. This is where most people fail, not because their planning is poor, but because they lack a system for actually following through when motivation disappears or distractions emerge. The psychological trick that eliminates procrastination isn't about willpower or discipline. It's about creating conditions where productive work becomes the path of least resistance. The missing piece that connects good planning with actual execution comes from an unexpected source. A comedian developed a simple rule that transforms your relationship with your schedule from optional suggestions to non-negotiable commitments. This rule eliminates the usual escape routes that procrastination uses to avoid difficult tasks, working regardless of your personality type, attention span, or previous productivity failures. The Seinfeld rule that eliminates procrastination. Jerry Seinfeld developed a productivity rule that completely eliminates the mental gymnastics procrastination uses to justify avoiding work. The rule is stupidly simple but incredibly powerful. When it's time to work on something important, you have exactly 2 choices. You can do the task, or you can do absolutely nothing. But you cannot do anything else. No scrolling social media, no checking messages, no watching YouTube videos, no organizing your desk, no getting snacks from the kitchen. Just the task or complete an activity. This binary choice eliminates every single escape route that procrastination normally uses to avoid difficult work. Think about how procrastination usually works. You sit down to write that report or make those phone calls, but then you remember you should probably check your email first. Or you decide your workspace needs to be perfectly organized before you can focus. Or you convince yourself that watching one productivity video will help you get motivated. These seemingly reasonable alternatives give your brain permission to avoid the actual work while still feeling somewhat productive. The Seinfeld rule destroys all these comfortable middle grounds. When your only options are working or staring at the wall, suddenly working becomes the more appealing choice. Your brain wants stimulation, and if productive work is the only stimulation available, that's what it will choose. The rule tricks your procrastination tendencies into working for you instead of against you. Here's what makes this approach so effective with today's distracted generation. We've trained our brains to expect constant entertainment and stimulation. The moment something feels difficult or boring, we reach for our phones or open new browser tabs. We've created instant escape routes from any uncomfortable mental effort. But when those escape routes are deliberately blocked, our brains adapt quickly and find focus in the work itself. I started applying this rule during my scheduled priority task blocks, and the results were immediate. When I sat down to work on important projects, I would close all browser tabs, put my phone in another room, and give myself the stark choice: work on the project or sit there doing nothing. The psychological pressure of complete inactivity pushed me toward the work every single time. Sitting in silence with no stimulation feels more uncomfortable than tackling challenging tasks. The humor in this situation becomes obvious pretty quickly. Productive work, which normally feels difficult and requires willpower, suddenly becomes the easy option. When your alternative is literally staring at a blank wall, writing emails or making phone calls starts to feel like entertainment. The rule flips your entire relationship with work from something you avoid to something you choose because it's more interesting than the alternative. This approach works particularly well for people who struggle with attention disorders or chronic procrastination. Traditional advice about building willpower and creating motivation doesn't work for brains that have been rewired by constant digital stimulation. But the Seinfeld rule doesn't require willpower or motivation. It just requires you to honor a simple binary choice, which feels much more manageable than trying to force yourself to focus. The psychological shift that happens when distractions are completely off the table is remarkable. Your brain stops scanning for alternative activities because it knows none are available. This eliminates the mental energy normally wasted on internal negotiations about whether to keep working or switch to something more enjoyable. The decision has already been made, which frees up cognitive resources for actually completing the task. I noticed this shift most clearly during writing sessions. Normally, I would start a writing project and within minutes find myself checking social media or reading random articles online. My brain would constantly negotiate with itself about whether to continue writing or take a quick break. But when I applied the Seinfeld rule, this internal chatter stopped completely. Writing became the only interesting option available, so my brain committed fully to the activity. The rule also creates a different relationship with discomfort and mental effort. Most productivity advice tries to make work feel easy and enjoyable, but the Seinfeld rule acknowledges that meaningful work often requires pushing through uncomfortable feelings. When your only alternative to discomfort is complete boredom, you develop tolerance for the mental effort required to accomplish important things. This principle works across different types of tasks and projects. Making difficult phone calls becomes easier when your alternative is sitting in silence. Studying complex material feels less overwhelming when procrastination activities are unavailable. Exercise routines become more consistent when you remove the option to scroll through fitness videos instead of actually working out. The effectiveness of this simple rule extends beyond individual work sessions. Over time, it trains your brain to associate focused work with relief and stimulation rather than effort and discomfort. Your neural pathways start connecting productive activities with positive feelings, which makes it easier to choose work over distractions even when the rule isn't actively being applied. The rule works especially well during the morning hours when willpower is strongest and distractions are fewer. Combining early scheduling with the binary choice creates optimal conditions for completing priority tasks. Your brain is naturally more alert, the world is quieter, and your only options are meaningful work or complete inactivity. This alignment of timing and structure produces consistent results regardless of motivation levels or external circumstances. The simplicity of the rule makes it sustainable over long periods. Complex productivity systems often fail because they require constant decision-making and adjustment. The Seinfeld rule requires no optimization, no tracking, and no complicated implementation. You either follow the binary choice or you don't. This eliminates the maintenance overhead that kills most productivity methods. The social media companies and app developers have spent billions of dollars engineering their products to capture and hold your attention. They employ teams of neuroscientists and behavioral economists to make their platforms as addictive as possible. Fighting this level of sophisticated manipulation with willpower alone is like bringing a knife to a gunfight. The Seinfeld rule levels the playing field by removing these engineered distractions from the equation entirely. When you combine strategic hourly scheduling with this binary choice rule, something remarkable happens. The simple framework creates conditions where important work gets completed reliably, regardless of mood or motivation levels. The results from applying these basic principles consistently over time can be genuinely surprising. The results that prove this system works in 2025. My business metrics demonstrate exactly what happens when you stop fighting digital chaos and start working with your brain instead of against it. Using this simple $2 notebook system, I built a six-figure online business and grew my audience to over 450,000 people across multiple platforms. These numbers are completely verifiable and happened through consistent daily execution, not through paid advertising or growth hacks. The business generates reliable monthly revenue that lets me work from anywhere and focus on projects that actually matter. The skepticism makes perfect sense. How can something this basic produce results that complex digital systems promise but rarely deliver? I understand why people doubt that a paper notebook could outperform sophisticated project management software, AI-powered productivity apps, and elaborate digital workflows. The simplicity seems almost insulting compared to the high-tech solutions everyone else is using. But effectiveness has nothing to do with complexity or sophistication. Before implementing this system, I was switching between 15 different productivity apps and getting less done than when I had no system at all. My daily output was inconsistent and scattered. Projects would drag on for months without meaningful progress. I would start each week with ambitious plans and end it feeling frustrated about how little I had accomplished. The digital tools were creating more work than they were eliminating. After switching to analog planning, my project completion rate increased by roughly 300%. Tasks that used to take weeks of procrastination and scattered effort now get finished in concentrated blocks of focused work. The quality of my output improved significantly because my attention stopped being divided between work and digital distractions. The mental exhaustion from constantly managing multiple productivity systems disappeared completely. The business growth happened because this system eliminated the productivity theater that was consuming my time and energy. Instead of spending hours optimizing my digital setup, tweaking notification settings, and learning new productivity methods, I could focus entirely on activities that actually generate revenue. Writing content, creating products, building relationships with my audience, and developing new business opportunities became my primary focus. Content creation became dramatically more efficient once I stopped fighting digital distractions. Writing sessions that used to produce 500 words after 3 hours of struggle now generate 2,000 words in 90 minutes of focused work. The Seinfeld rule eliminated the constant temptation to check social media, read random articles, or get lost in research rabbit holes that felt productive, but created no actual output. The audience growth resulted from consistency rather than viral content or clever marketing strategies. When you have a clear schedule that prioritizes content creation during peak mental energy hours, producing regular valuable content becomes automatic rather than sporadic. Publishing became predictable instead of dependent on motivation or inspiration. The compound effect of consistent output over 22 months created the audience numbers that seem impressive, but were really just the natural result of showing up daily. This method proves more effective than complex digital systems because it acknowledges how human brains actually work in 2025. We're overstimulated, easily distracted, and suffering from decision fatigue. Adding more complexity through sophisticated apps and elaborate workflows makes these problems worse, not better. The simplicity of pen and paper reduces cognitive load instead of increasing it, which creates mental space for actual productive work. Digital productivity systems fail because they're designed by software companies trying to solve engineering problems, not human psychology problems. They optimize for features and functionality rather than sustainable behavior change. They assume you want more options and customization when what you actually need is fewer choices and clearer direction. They promise to make everything easier while actually making everything more complicated. The analog approach adapts perfectly to 2025's unique challenges because it exists outside the entire ecosystem of digital distraction. When your productivity system cannot send notifications, cannot crash, and cannot be updated overnight, it becomes immune to the technological chaos that destroys everyone else's focus. The method stays constant while everything else changes around it. Remote work, which creates blurred boundaries between personal and professional time, actually makes this system more valuable rather than less relevant. When your bedroom is your office and your kitchen table is your conference room, having a physical anchor that defines structure becomes essential. The notebook provides clear boundaries and concrete accountability that digital tools cannot match in distributed work environments. The economic uncertainty and rapid technological change that define modern life make long-term digital planning feel pointless, but daily analog planning remains practical and actionable. You cannot predict what apps will be popular next year or what features will be deprecated, but you can always buy a notebook and write down what needs to happen today. The timeless nature of the method makes it more reliable than cutting-edge alternatives. Social media addiction and shortened attention spans, which make traditional productivity advice ineffective, actually strengthen the case for analog tools. When your brain craves constant stimulation and novelty, removing digital options forces focus back onto meaningful work. The friction of handwriting slows down decision-making in productive ways, creating space for thoughtful consideration rather than impulsive task switching. The transformation potential becomes obvious when you realize that most productivity problems are actually attention management problems disguised as time management issues. You have enough time to accomplish your important goals. You lack the sustained focus required to work on them consistently. This system solves the attention problem by creating structure that supports deep work rather than competing with it for mental resources. Mastering these fundamentals opens up possibilities that remain invisible when you're caught in the complexity trap of modern productivity culture. When your daily planning takes 2 minutes instead of 30 minutes, you have extra time for actual work. When your system never crashes or needs updates, you develop reliability and consistency that compounds over months and years. When your tools eliminate rather than create distractions, your output quality and quantity improve simultaneously. The confidence that you can achieve similar results comes from recognizing that this system requires no special skills, expensive equipment, or unique personality traits. Anyone can buy a notebook and write down their schedule. Anyone can apply the Seinfeld rule during work sessions. Anyone can prioritize important tasks during peak energy hours. The barrier to entry is practically non-existent, which means the barrier to success depends entirely on consistent application rather than complex execution. This system works precisely because it rejects the assumption that innovation automatically means improvement. Sometimes stepping backward reveals solutions that were there all along. Your productivity transformation starts with rejecting the complexity that's been sold to you as progress. Before you download another productivity app or sign up for another course promising to revolutionize your workflow, try this $2 solution for 1 week. Buy a basic notebook, write down your schedule each morning, and apply the Seinfeld rule during work sessions. That's it. You already have everything you need to transform your productivity. Your phone, your laptop, your brain, they all work fine. What you need isn't more tools, but better systems for using what you have.